What they didn't expect was that capturing one old woman's 800-pound grizzly bear would be their biggest mistake. Margaret Maggie Callahan had spent 4 years rehabilitating Thunder from a wounded cub into a magnificent grizzly. Now, with her bear trapped in the gang's grip, this 75-year-old rancher was about to show them why you don't mess with a woman's family, even when that family has fur and claws. Maggie wasn't fighting alone. A brotherhood of combat-hardened motorcycle club veterans stood ready to wage war against the gang's growing shadow. In a town where loyalty ran deeper than blood, the price of freedom was about to become clear. The gang thought they were dealing with simple ranchers and worn-out veterans. They were wrong. As their scheme to control Red Hollow through fear and false kindness unraveled, the true power of a border town rose to meet them. This was the story of how one bear's capture ignited a powder keg of resistance no one saw coming, and how a small town's refusal to surrender would leave everyone speechless. The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across Callahan Ranch. Maggie's weathered boots crunched against the gravel as she made her way to the bear enclosure, a massive structure spanning nearly 2 acres of her property. Her arthritic hands gripped a bucket of fresh fish and fruit, today's breakfast for Thunder. "Come on out, big fella," Maggie called, her voice carrying across the morning stillness. Breakfast time. The massive grizzly emerged from his den, 800 pounds of pure muscle and grace. Thunder's dark eyes fixed on Maggie, but there was no aggression in them, only recognition and trust built over years of care and rehabilitation. An old truck pulled up in a cloud of dust, and Olivia Morales, the town veterinarian, climbed out. She had been helping Maggie with Thunder since the day they found him, a wounded cub caught in an illegal trap. "Morning, Maggie. How's our boy today?" Olivia asked. "Strong as ever," Maggie replied, watching Thunder delicately pick through his breakfast. "Though he's been restless lately, something's got him spooked." Olivia's expression turned serious. "Have you heard about the meeting in town yesterday? Some company called Borderland Agricultural is making big promises, talking about revitalizing Red Hollow, bringing in jobs." Maggie's face darkened. "Heard about it. Also heard their spokesman, Lucas Vega, has been asking questions about my property, specifically about Thunder." "You think something's off?" Olivia asked. 40 years working this land taught me one thing," Maggie said. "When something looks too good to be true, it usually is." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant rumble of motorcycles. 3 riders approached the ranch, their bikes gleaming in the morning sun. Maggie recognized Gabe Torres, leader of the local Veterans Motorcycle Club, among them. He killed his engine, removing his helmet, his face etched with concern. "Maggie, got a minute?" Gabe asked. "There's something you need to know about these new investors." The next hour revealed a disturbing pattern. Gabe's club had connections across the border, and word was that Borderland Agricultural wasn't what it seemed. The gang had been using similar tactics in other towns, moving in with legitimate businesses, buying up property, slowly tightening their grip. "They're especially interested in border properties," Gabe explained, glancing at Thunder's enclosure. "Perfect for their operation. And having a bear sanctuary provides good cover for keeping people away from certain areas." Maggie's jaw tightened. "They can make all the offers they want. This land isn't for sale." "It might not be that simple," Gabe warned. "These people don't take no for an answer, and they've been asking about Thunder. Word is, they think having control over him might give them leverage over you." "We should inform Sheriff Walker," Olivia suggested. "Already tried," Gabe responded. "But with no concrete evidence, his hands are tied. Plus, the town council's already warming up to Vega's promises. Laura Price is leading the charge to fast-track their permits." Maggie watched Thunder lounging in his favorite spot by the pond. The bear seemed to sense the tension, his massive head turned toward the group, alert and watchful. "I've spent my whole life on this ranch," Maggie said, her voice firm. "Raised my family here, buried my husband here. Thunder's all I got left. If they think threatening him will make me roll over, they don't know who they're dealing with." Gabe nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You're not alone in this, Maggie. My boys and I have seen too many towns fall to these tactics. Red Hollow won't be one of them." As the motorcycles roared away, Maggie turned to Olivia. Better stock up on medical supplies. Something tells me we might need them. That night, Lucas Vega stood at the window of his newly opened office, studying a map of Red Hollow. His finger traced the boundary of Callahan Ranch, lingering on the marked location of Thunder's sanctuary. The old woman won't sell, his associate reported. Vega's smile was cold. Everyone has a pressure point. We just found hers. Make the arrangements. Let's see how stubborn she remains when her precious bear is in our custody. Maggie sat on her porch, cleaning her father's old rifle. Thunder's occasional grunts carried on the wind, familiar and comforting. But for the first time in years, Maggie didn't feel at peace. The rifle's metal gleamed in the moonlight, and Maggie remembered something her father used to say. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about being brave. It's about being too stubborn to back down when everything you love is at stake. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the empty streets of Red Hollow, and with it, the certainty that everything was about to change. Then, the first shot rang out in the distance. Maggie's heart lurched. Thunder let out a deep, guttural roar, the sound reverberating across the land. A second shot followed, closer this time. She was on her feet in an instant, the rifle gripped tight in her hands. A truck roared up the road, headlights bouncing off the dirt. Olivia came running from the barn, panic written across her face. "Maggie, they're here!" Maggie didn't hesitate. She chambered around, her voice steady. "Get inside and lock the doors. This ends tonight." The truck skidded to a stop at the ranch gate. Several figures stepped out, silhouetted against the high beams. One of them, a man in a dark suit, took a step forward. "Mrs. Callahan," Lucas Vega called out, his voice smooth, practiced. "We need to have a conversation." Maggie didn't lower the rifle. "You want a conversation? I've got one for you. Get the hell off my land." A tense silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken threats. Then, Vega sighed, shaking his head as if disappointed. "I was hoping you'd be reasonable," he said, voice smooth but edged with condescension. "Looks like we'll have to do this the hard way." From the shadows behind him, more figures emerged, armed, disciplined, moving in formation like predators scenting blood. Their boots crunched against the dirt as they fanned out, their eyes locked on the massive enclosure at the heart of Maggie's land. Thunder let out a low, warning growl from his pen, the grizzly's hulking form shifting restlessly in the moonlight. He could sense the tension, the looming violence in the air. Maggie exhaled slowly, steadying herself. They thought they could take her bear, her home, her land. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. And she wasn't alone. The wind carried a new sound, one that sent a shiver down Vega's spine, deep, guttural, growing louder. Not a storm, something else. Engines. The distant hum turned into a roar as headlights appeared over the hill, slicing through the darkness like a vengeful tide. Motorcycles poured down the ridge in a rolling wave of chrome and steel, their riders clad in leather, their faces set in grim determination. Gabe rode at the front, his eyes locking onto Maggie's. She didn't have to say a word, he already knew. This wasn't just a standoff, it was war. Maggie lifted her chin, meeting Vega's stare head-on. "Like I said," she murmured, steel in her voice, "this land isn't for sale." The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, the night exploded. Gunfire erupted, flashes of light streaking through the dark as bullets bit into dirt and steel. The roar of engines mixed with battle cries, men colliding in the chaos, fists and weapons swinging. Thunder bellowed, his massive form crashing against the enclosure, rattling the steel bars. He could smell the fear, the blood, the battle, and he wanted in. With a final, earth-shaking lunge, the gate burst open, and the grizzly stormed free. The men closest to the enclosure didn't have time to scream. Vega cursed, stepping back as the battlefield devolved into pandemonium. His men were trained, but they hadn't planned for this. For a woman who refused to break. For a bear that wasn't just a pet, but a force of nature. For an outlaw club willing to fight to the death for one of their own. Maggie moved through the chaos with purpose, dodging, striking, unrelenting. A man lunged for her, but she twisted, slamming the butt of her rifle into his jaw. He crumpled, and she didn't spare him a second glance. Across the battlefield, Gabe tore through their ranks, fists and bullets equally deadly. He reached her side in seconds, grabbing her hand briefly, squeezing. She was alive, she was fighting. Together, they would finish this. Vega, now backpedaling, wiped blood from his mouth, fury twisting his face. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her. You don't know what you've started. He spat, chest heaving. Maggie lifted her rifle, aiming it right at his heart. No, she said, voice quiet, steady. I know exactly what I've finished. A gunshot rang out. Vega staggered, eyes wide with shock as he collapsed to his knees. The battle raged on, but Maggie barely heard it. The fight for Red Hollow had begun, and she wasn't going to lose.